Bonjour! In this video, I'll be showing you how to use your contoured bodice block to create any design that you want. So for each design that I will be creating, I will show picture at the end of each, and then at the end of the video, I'll show what everything looks like on me. So let's get started. So let's get started with contour guideline number 1, which is to remove gaping from our necklines. I also mark my shoulder ease because I am choosing to go with the Queen Anne Neckline design. And I'm also choosing not to go with the entire shoulder strap, so I am removing some of it. The amount that I chose is 3/4 of an inch to remove from my shoulder strap because I don't want the entire shoulder. And next I measure from my neck pit to where I want my design to end at the front, and I decided that would be 4.5 inches for me because I want to go with a sweetheart neckline, so I want it to go a bit low. And I mark that on my pattern. Next I am angling my ruler from my shoulder point that I mark to close, angling it towards my armhole because you don't want it to be straight, you want it to be angled out towards your armhole. And now I am angling down so I can create that sweetheart neckline effect. I am angling my ruler up, moving my ruler up to shape my neckline here and give it the sweetheart neckline effect that I desire on my pattern. And now I'm going to cut the guideline on the straight side, and I'm going to cut all the way to the bust point, not through it, just to the bust point. And I'm going to do the same thing on my waist dot as well. I am going to cut all the way to the bust point, not through it. And that leaves just a little bit of attachment, and that allows me to move my pieces around and close my guideline. And wherever my design meets when the guideline closes, that is where I will be taping my pattern down. It's not about the circle closing, it's about the design meeting at the guideline closure. And so now I'm smoothing out my line once I tape my piece down, making everything smooth. And right now I'm using a scrap piece of paper to close my dot. I was still debating whether I wanted to show you this bodice with a dot or something else. So it took some time for me to actually make a decision. I moved around the pattern before I decided on that. Right now I am working on the shoulder ease to remove the excess that is at that neck point on my shoulder ease. And because we have the dip in the middle, I do have to create a straight line and to go all the way towards my shoulder tip. And that is what you're seeing now. Next, I go ahead and remove all the excess from the pattern that I don't need to reveal my neckline. So then I visited my dot again because I thought at that point maybe I will just show what that dot would look like on your bodice if you choose to make a large dot and how pointy your bust would look. But part of me still wanted to do this right. And really, when you have a bodice like this that has contoured design, rarely will you see a dot like this, like on the bodice like that. Usually it will be a multiple piece bodice. The bodice will be cut into multiple pieces to offset the dot, or it will be a torso block with a narrow dot. And right now I am removing the excess ease on my shoulder strap because I was just moving around making decision on my dot. And now I am going to shape my back. I am going to make my shoulder strap the same as it is in the front by marking what I have on the front instead of using my measurement, which you could do as well. And I am shaping my back neckline now. Really, you should be squaring in from the center back, but because this is such a small amount, I just went in with my curve ruler. Now I am removing my shoulder ease on the back as well. It is such an insignificant amount, but I still marked it and smooth it out to the shoulder tip. And now I am cutting it out, and then I will be testing my curve, my neckline curve, which I like for everything to be aligned, and I wanted to make sure everything looks smooth, and I liked how it looked, so I decided to cut out the excess from my neckline at the back, and then I put it together again just to see what it would look like finally. And I was satisfied, and I was satisfied as well with the way the armhole looked, how things were aligned from the shoulder tip. And then I ended up with this, but I just was not satisfied. I needed something to be done right, and I decided it would be this first design. So I decided to go with the princess seam, and this is when we come in with the multiple piece bodice to offset the large dot. And for the princess seam, you could go towards the armhole, or you could go towards the neckline, and that would be as if you're going towards the shoulder line for a shoulder princess seam. But because the neckline is so wide, that would be more of a neckline princess seam. So if you do have a smaller bust, I recommend you do a armhole princess seam because that creates a nicer illusion. And you can see my ruler also, the curvy side is on my lower bust because I am fuller on my lower bust, and on the upper part I am more shallow, so I have the more shallow part of my ruler there. And I am just smoothing out my princess seam line here, and I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side to make sure the line connects to my contour dot leg. I want to make sure my princess seam line that I just drew connect smoothly with my contour dot leg on the other side. And once that was done, I was satisfied with my decision, and I will have plenty of opportunity to show you how bad your dot could look in the other designs that I'll be showing you. But this is what I decided to go with, the princess seam. And now I am just cutting out my piece, so I'm going to end up with a 3-piece bodice for the front. I just wanted to have one piece that was done correctly for this project, and this just so happened to be the first one. So yeah, that's what I have. And I am just putting my notching points there where I will be notching on my fabric. And I love to notch at my circumference points always, because the circle is always supposed to meet, it's always supposed to connect, and so I always use those points to mark my notches. And I also use the bust line as well that was in the middle that I mark my notch point at. So yeah, the circle is supposed to meet on the top and on the bottom. Wherever you connect it back together, it should still give you the shape of a circle. And so yeah, this is what my pattern is looking like, the multiple piece bodice, and this is everything together. And then yeah, I used a purple pillowcase that I had and cut everything out on it, and wait for my final result. The next guidelines I'm focusing on are number 2 and 3 for cutout armholes and armhole ease. I will also be using the shoulder ease because I've chosen to go with a halter neckline design that has a neckband to it. I wanted my armhole to be lower than the original armhole that I have, so I decided to go half an inch lower on the armhole, and then I start drawing in my design on the pattern, and I used 2 different rulers because I wanted the round curve under my armhole. And next I start designing my neckband, which is 1 inch, so I start placing 1 inch mark all around the neck until I reach that halter neck design that I place first. And once I'm done placing my marks, I am going to connect them all with my curved ruler, and that's how I get my neckband. And next I am going to cut open my guideline. I'm starting with the first one, which is for the cutout armhole for this design, and I'm cutting all the way to the bust point, not through it. I am opening my dot as well so I can move things around, and I'm cutting to the bust point, not through it, so that leaves a bit of attachment for me to close my guideline. And I'm closing my guideline where the design lines meet, and I would rather a bit go under and both points meet than for me to just close one point and leave a little hanging. And next I am opening my second guideline, which is for the armhole ease, and because this is a neckline where there's a long line of curve, this is best for me to do to avoid gaping. And I close the entire armhole ease guideline on this one. And now I'm smoothing out my line for the halter neck top, and I have to just use the best ruler that works for me and give me a smooth line, and that was that. And as you can see here, I am going to work on my dot. I'm placing a scrap piece of paper underneath my dot where I had opened it from closing in my guidelines. And I've chosen to go with a curved dot, and that's because sometimes it is said that that's going to avoid a pointy bust, and that works when it is a long dot, not a contour dot. So I am using my curve ruler to create a curvy dot, and you can see all the excess that is taken in from the contour lines are going to be added to the garment, and that is why this is not gonna work, because I am doing this with my contoured points, but I'm adding all the excess that should have been taken out to match the contouring under my bust. I'm adding that to the garment, and this is where we're going to have a problem with this. And you'll see my results with different dots that I try in all my designs. Another thing worth mentioning is that this may work for somebody with a large bust because they have the volume at their bust to fill up all the volume that is added with the extra garment, with the extra space from having added that excess. But for me, having a small bust, I do not have the volume to fill up all that extra space. So sometimes people do still use a curvy dot with a small bust, and that leaves pulling of fabric in in between your chest because there's so much excess fabric there, and that's why this does not work for somebody with a smaller bust, but for someone with a large bust that may work. And as you can see, I'm cutting off all the excess that I don't need from my pattern to reveal my design. And this is my halter neck design for the front. Well, once I take off all the excess that I don't need, such as the shoulder ease and also the dot as you see here. And now I am going to shape the back of my pattern, and I am putting the neckband past the ease amount at the shoulder because I had already cut off my ease at the front, and I marked the same amount from the front, the 1 inch. And on the side seam, I am marking just as much as I took out from the front, which was the 1/2 inch where I lowered my armhole. And now I am marking 1 inch for my neckband at the back as well. And my curve at the back is different from what I have at the front, so when I'm curving it, it does not look exactly the same for my curve ruler. And that's what I have for my neckband. And it looks different because of the curve at the back being different from what is at the front. And now I am curving my armhole and using different curve rulers to get the lines that I want. And this is it for my design at the back. And now I am going to remove all the excess that I don't need for my design. I don't need this at the armhole. I am removing all the shoulder ease as well to reveal my design at the back. And then once I'm done cutting everything away, I am going to make sure everything is aligned under the arm like this. Make sure all my curve is aligned, and at the neck as well, that my curves are aligned there on both sides. And this is it for my halter neck design. And the next guidelines I'm going to show you are guidelines number 5 and number 1 together. I am also going to use my shoulder guideline as well because I'm doing a v-neck design to show you how these guidelines work for a v-neck. And I'm measuring how much I want my strap to be for now. I will be making adjustments later on. So right now I am marking 1 1/4 inch for my shoulder strap. I do not like v-necks because they tend to make my chest look more narrow than it already is. So I am doing a wider v-neck just to have width. And now that I have my point mark for where I want my strap to be, I am going to now use my curve ruler to create that v-neck. I don't like a straight v-neck. I think those are rare, so I am just using a curve ruler for that. And I'm going all the way to the end of guideline number 5, which is the cleavage guideline. Really what that does, it just separates your bust, but you will see how much that really did for me. So right now I'm cutting through my guideline number 1. I marked 2, but it is the first guideline. I am cutting on the straight line all the way to the bust point, not through it. And I am also going to open up the waist dot as well. And I'm going to cut to the bust point, not through it. And now that that's done, I'm going to close my guideline, and it is always where the design lines meet the guideline on each side. That's where I close. And once that's done, I am going to tape my pattern down. And next I'm going to cut my second guideline, which is guideline number 5. It doesn't matter where I would cut, which line I would cut, but I prefer to cut the line that is further away from the one that just cut. So that's why I'm choosing the lower line. And once that's closed, it's going to look weird. So it's important to remember where your line ends because my line does not go past the contour point. So that's important for me to remember where that line ends. So I make sure that that's where it is going to connect from the shoulder point. And you don't have to close the entire guideline for this if you don't want to, but mine was only 3/4 of an inch, so I just closed the entire thing and I taped the pattern down once I closed it. And now I am smoothing out my neckline, and you just use whichever ruler gives you the smoothest line. Because mine is curvy, so I just have to figure out whichever curve ruler works for me to give me a smooth neckline, and that's that. And I will be cutting my center front on the fold line, and that's what I am marking here. I lowered my armhole by 1/2 inch like I did previously, and that's what I marked here. I decided to move some of the dot space into a bust dot, so I am doing that here. Initially I was just gonna move some of it, but because of the way it closed, I decided the side was not really that much. Once it closed at the front, I decided to just put the entire thing to a bust dot instead of just putting some of it on the waist and some on the bust dot. And either way I go, I would still have a pointy bust because I am still using the contoured dot legs on my bust, and that gives me a wide dot no matter what, because I'm not sewing all the way to the bust point. I still come down by 5/8 of an inch in my case. So I would still get a pointy bust no matter what. I think the only way to avoid that would be by maybe using a shoulder dot along with a waist dot, and maybe just use the dot regularly as it is so that it's not contoured. That way you just get a regular looking bodice underneath the bust point. Or you can remove some of the dot space from the side seam, which I've done in some cases as well. But that would be the only way to avoid a busty point if you're using your actual bodice block like this, without it being a torso block, or you're using a multiple piece bodice block. In my opinion, that's what I think, at least. But yeah, I will show you me removing some of the dot, and I still had a pointy bust because I didn't remove enough, and I still only used one dot, so that still gave me some issue. But anyways, you just cut everything off once you're done. And now I am shaping the back of my pattern. And now I'm making sure the width of my shoulder strap at the back is going to be the same as the front, and I am removing 1/2 inch from the underarm to lower my armhole by 1/2 inch. And I am now marking my design line at the back, and it is going to be a V-neck at the back. And you can see that my contour dot does not go all the way to my design line, but I will still be removing some ease because my shoulder blades are rounded and my center back is inward, and so if I don't remove ease, I will have some gaping at the back because of the way my shoulder blades are shaped. Unlike the halter top, where I did not need to do that because it went over my shoulder blades on the side, this one goes to the center back. Oftentimes I would remove ease from the armhole, so I would cut to the armhole and then blend 1/4 of an inch or 3/8 of an inch, whatever it is, depending on how curvy my line would be. But this time I am removing it from the back dot. I am going to open the back dot a bit so I can get 1/4 of an inch in ease, because my design line, which is the V-neck, it's not super rounded, so I'm just taking 1/4 of an inch. That's often my default for ease that I'm removing when my design line does not meet with the guideline at the back. If it's not curvy, if it's not super curvy. If it is curvy, I would go for more than 1/4 of an inch. And next, I'm using a square piece of paper and tape my pattern piece down onto that piece of paper, and then I am going to smooth out my design line at the back. As you can see, it is curvy but not super curvy, and then I just cut it out once I smooth out the line. And then I will be moving to my back dot and just closing that in with a square piece of paper, or just smoothing it out. And now I am making sure everything is aligned at the shoulder seam. I just, by preference, like to have a smooth straight line at the shoulders, or where the shoulders meet. I like for that first 1.5 inch of the armhole to be straight, and so that's what I did there, and align everything together. Now I am connecting my armhole at the back to where I lowered it, and I'm just smoothing out that line for a new armhole because I lowered it. And I'm still just making sure everything is aligned, everything is straight the way I prefer to have it. Now I am just making sure I have a smooth line under the armhole as well. I just like to have things aligned, curves to meet in a smooth line, and for the straight lines to look straight and be aligned. That's just my preference. I don't know if it has to be done that way with pattern making, I'm not sure, but I just like to have things done that way. And this is it. My pattern is done and cut out, and that's the result. And now the next guideline, I'm focusing on is guideline number 6 for our strapless bodies, and I marked that on the back as well. And that is a combination of guideline number 1, 2, and 3. That is a total of these 3 guidelines. That's what makes up number 6. And next, I am marking my design on my pattern, and I want a curvy neckline. So I like for where my curves meet to be smooth, so that's why I'm scoring in. And then I'm going to lower my armhole by 1/2 inch. And then I'm going to connect these 2 points together, the armhole and that squared in point I just marked at the center front. And that's just for me to see how steep my line would be, meaning how deep my curve will end up being. I don't want it to be too shallow. So I marked the middle of that line, I just eyeballed it. And now I'm going to connect the center front to that middle of the line. And This is the first time I'm trying this. I saw something and I liked it and I wanted to try it. And now I'm flipping my curve ruler to connect the armhole to the middle of that point as well, so I can create my curve. And granted, this is not the final design, because once you close your guidelines, that's when you really smooth out your lines and get the actual design that you want on your pattern. And now that I have a rough draft of my design line, I am going to connect it to my guideline since it's not connected. And now that that's done, I am going to shape the side of my bust, and you do not want it to be like a cone, so you need your curve ruler to shape the side. And I have the more shallow part of my curve ruler on the top part because I'm more shallow on top. I just feel like that helps, but I do think that's the right way anyway, that people do things. Otherwise, I feel like if I didn't do that, I would have gotten a superficially rounded bust. It would just be super round. It would look very fake instead of my chest blending in. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, blending my lines, my contour line to the bodice line, the guideline. And I decided to go over my lines with a different marking tool that is of a different color so you could see the lines better. And now I'm just smoothing out all of my lines on the dot legs, and just to make sure I have no indentation, nothing sharp, only smooth lines, and that does prevent you from having wrinkles on your garment as well. And I'm cutting everything off now, and as you can see, I'm leaving the excess paper on top so that when I connect my design line to smooth it out, I don't have to add excess paper. And as you can see, now I'm marking my notches, and I like to put my notches where my circle points are, and I feel like that always gives me a smooth connection. And I also do so on the bust line as well, as you can see. And now that my guideline is closed, I can now finish off my design line. As you can see, my notches are meeting at the circle points, and that's what I like to do when my pieces are going to be separated. I like for my notches to be at the circle points. And so now I'm finishing off my design line here, and I did eventually decide to add a bit to my curve at the center front. Not too much, maybe a quarter of an inch for what I added. And as usual, whenever I have two curve points that are meeting, I like for it to be smooth so that my curve can be smooth. So I went in and squared in just a little bit from the center front so that I can have a smooth curve when my pattern opens up. And I really like the way things were looking. So now it's time to cut off all the excess paper that I don't need and reveal my actual pattern for the front pieces. And then I'm starting with the back, and I am just making sure everything is aligned by removing half an inch as well from the back, just like I did in the front. And here I'm just trying to figure out how low I wanted to go on the center back, and then I square in once I found out where I wanted to go, and then connect my side seam to my center back. And then I'm just gonna cut everything off that I don't need and remove all the excess contouring from the dot as well. And then I'm just gonna mark my center back for what it is and my side back for what it is, so I do not get any pieces confused. And here I'm tipping things down so I can smooth out my line for the back. And I'm just gonna cut out the excess that I don't need. And then my pattern is pretty much done. I am pretty much done with the strapless bodice. I like how all my pieces connect smoothly at the side seam, and I just went ahead and cut everything out, and then that's my final result. In this next demonstration, I will be doing an asymmetrical neckline design where both sides of my front are different. So on one side, it will be strapless. On the other side, there will be a strap, of course. And so to get started, I trace down my pattern and make sure I have both side of the front open to me and ready to use. On one side, I trace down my guideline for the strapless side, and on the other side I trace my guideline for my neckline where I will have the side that has a strap. And here I am lowering my armhole by half an inch, and I'll be doing so on each side, and that will be the same case for the front and the back. Next, I'm just using a line to connect my underarm to my shoulder strap because I just wanted to see what it would look like and try to use that to help me get a more shallow curve on my neckline. I did not want something deep, and I did not measure my shoulder strap. I simply just eyeballed it and just went with something that was not too narrow. I wanted it to just be like a medium-sized strap. And now that I have my design line down, I am going to connect my guideline to my design line. Since it's not connected to it naturally, I'm connecting the lines. And then next I'm going to shape my armhole and connecting that 1/2 inch mark under my arm. Now I'm cutting through my guideline at the neckline for the side that has a strap, and then I'm opening it up at the waist dot as well so I can move my guideline. I am choosing to close in my guideline by 1/4 of an inch because what I had here is less than that, and to me that's just too insignificant. The minimum I go in for is usually 1/4 of an inch, so I made it 1/4 of an inch. And next I am just shaping the side of my bust for my strapless side of my bodice. And then I smooth out my line on the other side as well to make everything smooth, and also the dot legs on both sides of my bodice. And then I went ahead and placed my notches where I wanted them to be, which is usually at my circle points and at my bust line as well. On the top, I did put them in the wrong place, and I ended up realizing that later on when I tried to smooth out my neckline. And I'm just cutting off all the extra pieces right now, leaving the extra paper on there. And here is when I realized that I placed my notches wrong because my circle point was not connecting, and I need that to connect smoothly so I can still have my circle shape going on, and that's what helps me to smooth out my neckline or my design lines. So I corrected myself there. And now I'm just shaping my neckline, smoothing out everything. I did wish I made the neckline slightly deeper. I feel like it's too shallow. On the strapless part, I did adjust it slightly to make the line more curvy. And then I went ahead and cut off the extra piece I don't need from that side. Here I am shaping my shoulder strap. I am removing 3/8 of an inch, and then I went in and found the midpoint of my new shoulder strap, and I will be connecting that point to the bust point so I can create my princess seam from there. Here I am using my curve ruler to shape my bust for the princess seam, and I'm smoothing out the other side. Added my notches where I like to add them, and then I will be cutting out that pattern piece and then remove all the excess that I don't need from this pattern piece as well. I will be using my shoulder strap to shape the back of my pattern as well, so I can have the right measurement for the front and for the back for them to be the same. I am just removing the excess from here as well, and I use a piece of tape to keep down that piece that was flying off, and cut out my neckline and shoulder ease. And that was it for my front of my pattern. I like the way that my design line is looking with the pieces together. Here I am removing 3/8 of an inch just like I did in the front, and I am making sure my shoulder strap is the same width for the back as it is in the front, just making sure they're equal. And now I'm lowering my armhole at the back as well, and then I'll be connecting that to the shoulder strap point from where I marked my 3/8 of an inch, just like you see here. And I want to make sure it's smoothly connected to the front piece, and then I'm going to work on my other side, lowering the armhole as well, and then I'm going to connect that point to my shoulder strap. And next I am marking the midpoint of my shoulder strap here just like I did in the front, and I am connecting that point to my dot leg here, my original dot leg, not the contoured one. I am doing the same thing on the other side of the dot as well, connecting the other dot leg to the midpoint on my shoulder. Here I am cutting out my pattern pieces, and I will be removing all of the excess that I don't need from my pattern piece. Once I'm done cutting this piece out, I am notching my pieces so I know where to connect them when I cut my fabric out. And then I will be removing more excess to make sure I get my pattern piece, remove my shoulder ease, and here I am cutting this out from the contour guideline so I can smooth out my neckline at the back. And I added my notches as you saw, and I'm using my curve ruler to smooth out my line here. And I just remove all the excess pieces, and my back is pretty much done. My pattern pieces are done. This is what they look like when they connect on paper, and here are all my pieces. I went ahead and cut them out, and this is the final result. And now I'm going to show you how to use your back contour guideline, even though I did that for the strapless bodice, but this is different. This is going to be a cutout back design, an open back design. I've already determined what my design is going to be, so I am going to square in from the center back to create my design line and draw it out on my pattern piece now. And this is going to be a two-piece bag, so I am working on the top piece where I am squaring in, and there is going to be a curve there. That's why I'm squaring in, for when they meet it is smooth. So I am going to draw my curve line now to create my design for my bag. And now that I have my two pieces drawn out for my back pattern, what you can do is use a tracing paper and trace one of the pieces onto it so that you can work on that separately. But if you don't have a tracing paper, I will be showing you how to do that now. So I'm starting out from the lower piece of my pattern. I am cutting out that center back piece, and then I will be removing all of the excess from the dot, contour dot, and I will be attaching that to the side piece. And now the lower part of my pattern is just one piece, and I'm just gonna smooth that out and have that one piece all smooth out, ready to cut it off of the top piece of my pattern. And that means I am leaving part of it behind, connected to that other piece of the pattern. So now I am tracing that piece that is left behind onto a scrap piece of paper, and I am going to outline it, trace it out, and then I'm gonna attach it to the other piece, to the large piece that it is supposed to be attached to, and tape everything down. And then I am notching my pattern because I have two pieces that have to connect together, so I know exactly where to connect them by using my notches. That helps me to do that. And then I am cutting off all the excess that I don't need, and then I am moving on to the top piece of my pattern. As you can see, my contour dot does not reach my design line high enough to give me an amount of ease to take out, so I am determining myself how much ease I want to take out, and that's going to be 3/8 of an inch, and that is because my design line is very curvy, so 3/8 of an inch I think is a decent amount versus a 1/4 inch. And so here I am cutting this line that I just drew from the point I am removing my ease from to the shoulder tip. I am going to cut that open, and then I'm marking 3/8 of an inch for the ease amount that I'm removing. And then I'm just gonna close in on that point, and that will help remove gaping from my back design, from my garment. I am taping everything down and then smooth out my line, and that will be it for my back pattern. I just need to cut it out, and then that is my back pattern completed. And I'm just gonna make sure everything aligns together, and that is it for my back. So I've decided for the front of this pattern, I just wanted to do an open neck at the front as well. And so I am squaring in for what I want my design to be. I am going to connect my line and just draw out my design on my pattern before I cut out my guidelines. And for the lower front, I've decided to go in with a sweetheart neckline. I say that a lot. I must be a sweetheart because I just use that word too much. Anyways, this is my design drawn out now. In my opinion, I believe whatever guideline your design cross, those are the guidelines that need to be crossed out. In this case, that will be guideline number 1 and 2, even though there is no cutout armhole going on here. But because the design line crosses these two guidelines, I believe they need to be cut out. However, I only remove the neckline one, and you will see the result that I get and why I think both should have been removed. For our strapless bodice, we remove 1, 2, and 3. And the 6th guideline is a combination of 1, 2, and 3. So I feel like that just shows why that should be the case. Whatever your design line crosses, that's what needs to be cut out. But I did not do that for this. I'm only removing ease at the neckline guideline. And next I am going to work on my dot. I am doing this different this time, although I'm still going to get a pointy bust because I am going to lower my bust point because I do not sew all the way to the bust point. But I am removing the 3/8 of an inch from my contour dot and placing it on the side seam instead so I can remove it there. And I did not take any specific measurement, I just eyeballed it and determined where to remove the 3/8 of an inch. And at the bottom on my waistline, as you can see, when I draw my line, it is much more than 3/8. So I measured that point and I take half of it and put it on each dot leg. And that's just to not remove anything at the waist because that's not the plan. The plan is to just remove excess from the dot. So here I'm putting a scrap piece of paper underneath my dot so I can finish it off. I am gonna go down 5/8 of an inch from the bust point, and then I'm going to connect my contour dot legs to that point. And as you can see, it is still very wide from the contour point. And also the excess from me lowering that point goes into my garment as well, and I don't like that. So in my opinion, I think shoulder dots work for doing something like this with contouring or multiple piece bodice, which would have been nice in this case if I did a princess bodice or a torso block. And now I'm doing the same thing I did at the back for that piece that overlaps and cutting it out to attach it to where it's supposed to be on the top piece of my pattern. And then I'm notching there again and taping my piece down and then cutting it out and finish off my design for the guideline on top, which should have been two guidelines total for me to take out, but I'm just doing the neckline here as well. I am closing that off. I had enough decency to remove extra from this piece because I just knew that it's almost like having a strapless piece or strapless bodice for the way it opens and detach from each other. So I removed excess, but I should have been more removed, and you will see why when you see the result that I got. And here, because some of my piece overlaps with the guideline, I am trying to open up my neckline. I should have opened it up all the way to the shoulder point as well, but I only lowered it at the center front instead of opening it up fully at the shoulder as well. And that's just to make it wider since some of it overlaps with the guideline, making it smaller. And so here I am just notching the other point, making sure everything matches, and I am marking my fold part where I am going to cut and fold. And my pattern is completed and I cut everything out, and this is the result. So for the empire waist, I also wanted to show how to cut the guidelines on there as well. It's the same thing as the main bodice pattern. I will be doing a plunging neckline sort of for this, or a deep v-neck, and I still want it to be somewhat wide, so I am drawing in my design on my pattern now, and it will cut through guideline number 5 and number 1 for my neckline. Next, I'm going to shape my armhole, and I believe the amount that I'm removing here at the shoulder tip is about 3/8 to half an inch, and I'm also lowering the armhole by half an inch. And now I am going to open my guideline on the neckline, and I am also going to extend my dot from the underbust so that I can open it up as well and close my guideline that I just opened up. And now it's time to close that guideline where the design line meets, and then tape everything down. And then I'm moving on to my next guideline, which is guideline number 5, to close that in as well. And as you can see, this guideline is different from when I did my v-neck where that neckline ended right on the guideline. This time it goes past it. So I am just smoothing out my line now with my curve ruler, and I do change that later because I do feel like it's a bit too curved in. It's curved in too deep. Here I am just working on my dot, and now I am smoothing out my neckline again to make it a bit more shallow and not too deep in. So here I am not going to close my dot. I am going to create gathers under the bust, and I'm marking how much I am going to gather under the bust, and that's going to be 2 inches of gather that I will be creating. So I am cutting out all the excess that I don't need from my pattern and move on to the back. And now I'm shaping my shoulder strap to make sure everything is the same in the back as it is in the front. This is how much I'm removing, and I am making sure my strap is the same width. And next I draw in my design line at the back, and I decided to go straight down and just a curved line, and I will be removing ease from that. Here I am making sure my armhole is going to be lowered at the back as well by half an inch, and I'm connecting that point to my shoulder strap and smooth everything out. I just like for my front and my back armhole to be smooth in a line. Next I am going to remove my ease from my design at the back, my design line, and that's gonna be at the lowest point of my dot where my design line touch. I am going to measure the width of that dot point where the design line touches at the lowest or at the widest. I measure that and I place that same measurement on my design line, and that's how much ease I am going to remove. And to remove that ease, I connect lines from the points that I marked onto the side seam, and I am going to cut the lines open and close that seam or that ease amount that I marked, and that will be how much is removed from my pattern to prevent gaping. And now I am smoothing out my design line at the back, and that's pretty much it for the pattern. I am just going to remove all the excess that I don't need from my pattern, all the excess paper, and then reveal my final pattern pieces. I decided not to do anything at the back. Here I am just smoothing out my shoulder strap, making sure everything is smooth. But for the back, I decided to just leave my dot as is and do nothing at that point. And that's all for my Empire Bodice pattern with a deep v-neck. I cut everything out, and here is the final